The text arrived just as I was finishing dinner. "Where are you? We're all waiting for you." It was from my wife, Claire. The words were normal, but the tone, cold and distant, struck me immediately. It was 8 p.m., my birthday, and I had planned nothing. Absolutely nothing. Because why would I? I sat there, staring at my empty plate, my hands shaking slightly. My phone buzzed again. "Everything okay?" Another message. But from who? A coworker? A friend? Maybe even a relative. I didn't know, nor did I care. My mind was elsewhere. The last few months had been strange, to say the least. I had lost track of Claire in ways I couldn't even explain. She wasn't physically absent, no, but emotionally? She had checked out long ago. Her friends had started noticing, but I didn't want to confront the truth. Not yet. Maybe tonight would be different. Maybe this birthday would be the turning point. I turned off the lights in the dining room and grabbed my coat. I didn't want to go, but I knew I had to. After all, I was still her husband, and my place was supposed to be by her side, wasn't it? I got into my car and drove to the venue, a little boutique restaurant she had picked out weeks ago. The kind of place that made you feel like royalty until you realized you couldn't afford to order anything except the water. But tonight, it didn't matter. I wasn't going to be that husband, the one who sulked and moped in the corner. No, tonight, I was going to be the man she remembered. As I parked and stepped out of the car, I saw Claire standing outside, chatting with a few friends. They were laughing. No, they were genuinely laughing. It wasn't the fake laugh I had heard countless times over the past year, but the kind of laugh that echoed in the air, the kind of laugh that made you feel like you were missing out on something spectacular. When Claire saw me, her smile faltered for just a split second. It was barely noticeable, but I saw it. Then, she quickly turned her attention back to the man beside her. David, her coworker. The one who had been showing up in her texts, in her late-night phone calls. The one who I hadn't met yet. Not formally, anyway. Claire had told me they worked late together a few times, but she always reassured me that there was nothing between them. But the way she introduced him to me that night, it wasn't just casual. It was personal, and it hurt. "Hey, babe." Claire greeted me with an awkward wave, her eyes never meeting mine. "This is David. You know, the guy I told you about." "Right?" I said, forcing a smile, but all I could do was glance at David, whose grin seemed a little too wide, too confident. David, of course, noticed my discomfort. He leaned in, shook my hand, and patted me on the back like we were old pals. But there was something about it. The way he did it, like he was taking something from me. Something I didn't even know I had left. It was clear from that moment on. My place in her life was no longer what it had once been. It was becoming painfully clear that Claire had already made her choice. The sad thing? I didn't even have the courage to voice it. I let it happen. I let her ignore me. I let her focus all her attention on him. The night dragged on, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being invisible. Claire talked to David like I wasn't even there. They laughed, joked, and at one point, she touched his arm as if it was the most natural thing in the world. I felt my heart sink. I tried to pull her aside, tried to get her to acknowledge me, but all I got in return was a cold stare. "I'm busy right now," she said without any emotion, turning back to David. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't just a husband anymore. I was an inconvenience, a mere detail in her life. My birthday, our birthday, meant nothing. Not to her, at least. I stood there for a while, feeling like the world had stopped spinning. Her laughter filled the space around me, and all I could do was watch them. Watch her. When the evening finally wound down, Claire stood up and said, "David and I are heading out. You'll be fine, right?" I wanted to say something. I wanted to yell, to demand answers. But instead, I just nodded. I wanted to leave, but I stayed, watching them walk out of the restaurant together, laughing as if nothing had changed. And in that moment, everything changed for me. I walked back to my car, feeling hollow. That night, I realized that Claire had already moved on. But I hadn't. Not yet. I sat in the car, staring at the dark street outside the restaurant, trying to process everything that had just happened. The chill of the night air seeped through the window, but it wasn't the cold that made me shiver. It was the realization that I had just watched my wife walk away with another man. My mind was spinning. How had things come to this? I had always tried to be the good husband. I worked hard. I paid attention to her. I made sure her needs were met. But it never felt like enough. Something had changed. I didn't know when, and I didn't know how, but I could feel it. The distance between us had been growing for months, maybe even years, but I had convinced myself it was just a rough patch. I thought if I tried harder, everything would fall back into place. But now I wasn't so sure. I texted Claire again, but it was pointless. She wouldn't reply. I knew that. As I sat there, something inside me snapped. I couldn't let this go on. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine when it was falling apart right in front of me. I started the car and drove. I didn't know where I was going, but I couldn't just sit there anymore, waiting for answers that would never come. I pulled over by a park near our house. It was late, and the park was empty, save for a few cars parked at the far end. I sat in the car for a while, staring out the windshield, trying to calm my racing thoughts. The moon was high in the sky, casting an eerie glow over everything. It felt like the world was watching me, judging me for being so weak, for not knowing sooner what was happening. After a while, I got out of the car and walked to the park bench. The silence was deafening. I thought about the way Claire had looked at David tonight, the way she smiled at him, like I wasn't even in the same room. I had known, deep down, that something wasn't right, but I had buried it. I had convinced myself that it was just a phase, that she was just busy with work or stressed out. I never wanted to confront the truth. I never wanted to believe that the woman I had spent so many years with was no longer the person I thought she was. I took out my phone and dialed her number. It rang for a while, but she didn't pick up. Not that I expected her to. I could feel the distance between us growing, widening with every passing second. And yet, I couldn't bring myself to stop trying. Maybe, just maybe, if I kept reaching out, she'd remember me. She'd remember what we had. But then I heard something, footsteps in the distance. I turned around quickly, my heart pounding in my chest. It was her, Claire. She was standing at the edge of the park, looking out into the darkness, her posture stiff. She hadn't seen me yet, but I had seen her. I couldn't explain it, but in that moment, I knew she had come to the park for a reason. She wasn't just walking, she was looking for something, or someone, and it wasn't me. I stayed hidden behind the bench, holding my breath, hoping she wouldn't see me. I watched as she slowly walked toward the parking lot, her head down, deep in thought. I followed her with my eyes, my heart sinking with each step she took away from me. But then, just as I was about to turn back to the car, I saw him. David. He was standing in the shadows by the entrance to the park, waiting for her. The moment she saw him, her face lit up. She ran to him, and without a second thought, they embraced. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. My world was shattering in front of me, and all I could do was watch as the woman I had trusted more than anything in the world wrapped her arms around another man. And in that moment, I knew. I knew that everything I had believed in, everything I had worked for, was a lie. They kissed. It was brief, but it was enough. I didn't need any more confirmation. I had all the proof I needed. Claire had moved on. I stayed there, frozen, until they finally broke apart and walked away together, hand in hand. I couldn't follow them. I couldn't make myself move. It was over. I left the park without saying a word to anyone. I couldn't go home to that empty house. I couldn't face her. Instead, I drove for hours, thinking about everything, what had gone wrong, how I had missed the signs, how I had let myself be so blind. Eventually, I found myself in a diner on the outskirts of town. I sat there, alone, nursing a cup of coffee as the weight of the night crushed me. It was the first time in months that I felt like I could finally breathe. Not because I was free, but because I was finally awake. Claire had made her choice. And now, I had to make mine. I couldn't shake the image of Claire and David, their hands entwined as they disappeared into the night. My heart felt hollow, a painful emptiness that I couldn't explain. I kept telling myself it wasn't real, that I was overreacting, but deep down, I knew the truth. She had chosen him over me. The man I'd watched her grow closer to. The man who'd somehow crept into our lives. All while I stayed blind to it. I had never felt more invisible in my entire life. I stayed in the diner for hours, long after the waitress had brought me my second, then third cup of coffee. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a soft glow over the parking lot. I couldn't bring myself to leave. Every part of me felt like I was on the edge of something dark and unexplainable. I kept replaying the night in my head, each moment taunting me. The way she ignored me, the way she smiled at David, the way she hadn't even noticed when I slipped away. I knew it wasn't just about her being with him. It wasn't just that she'd humiliated me in front of our friends. It was the complete and utter disregard for our life together. For years, I had believed in something that wasn't even real. And now, everything felt like a lie. I reached for my phone, staring at the empty screen. Should I call her? What would I even say? The idea of confronting her felt like I was stepping into a pit of quicksand. If I called, what would I even expect from her? The truth? Or more lies? I wasn't ready to face her. Not yet. I decided to go home. The drive was torturous. I didn't know what to expect when I walked through the door. The house was always supposed to be our safe place, the one place we could come back to and find comfort. But now it felt foreign, like a stranger's house, filled with echoes of the life I once thought we shared. When I arrived, the door was slightly ajar. I stepped inside, my footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors. Everything looked the same, but it didn't feel the same. The silence was deafening. I wandered through the rooms, waiting for something, anything, to make sense of it all. But the only thing that made sense was the feeling of abandonment. I went into our bedroom, my heart racing. I expected to find her there, maybe pretending to sleep, maybe avoiding me in the same way she had avoided me at the party. But there was no one. No Claire. The bed was empty. The sheets were undisturbed, as if she hadn't been there in hours, maybe even days. My phone buzzed again. A message from Claire. She hadn't called, but she had texted. I'm sorry. I need space. I'm going to stay at my mom's for a while. We need to figure things out. I stared at the message, the words piercing through my chest like daggers. Space. What had happened to us? What had happened to the love I thought we had? I wanted to reply, to scream at her, to tell her I knew everything, that I had seen her with David. But instead, I just stood there, feeling numb. I couldn't respond. I didn't have the words. How do you respond when your entire world comes crashing down, when the person you thought you knew better than anyone turns out to be a stranger? I turned off the phone, throwing it on the bed. I didn't need to hear any more lies. I paced the room for a while, my mind racing, my thoughts spiraling out of control. Was I even capable of fixing this? Was there even a chance? The truth is, I didn't know anymore. But one thing was clear. I wasn't going to sit around and wait for her to come back. I wasn't going to be the man she had left behind. I would take control of this. I didn't know how, but I knew I had to do something. I couldn't stay in this place of limbo, of uncertainty, anymore. I packed a bag. I didn't care where I was going. I didn't care what I was going to do. I just needed to get out of that house. I needed to leave the life I had known and figure out what came next. It felt like my world had shattered into 1,000 pieces, and all I could do was pick up the remnants and try to build something from it. I drove out of town, past the places we used to go, past the spots that held our memories. But this time, I wasn't looking for answers. I was looking for escape, for a moment of peace. I didn't know what was next, but I couldn't stay there any longer. Not in that house, not in that life. The road stretched out in front of me, endless and unknown. I drove for hours, the miles rolling by, until I finally reached a small town I'd never seen before. It wasn't much, just a few stores, a gas station, and a couple of houses, but for some reason, it felt like a place where I could breathe. I pulled over and sat in the car for a moment, staring out at the empty streets. My phone buzzed again, another text from Claire. But this time, I didn't open it. I couldn't. I wasn't ready to deal with her lies. I stepped out of the car, letting the cool air wash over me. Maybe this was what I needed. A fresh start. A chance to figure out who I was without her. A chance to rebuild my life, piece by piece. Because no matter what happened, I knew one thing for sure. I would never be the same again. And neither would Claire. The small town felt almost unreal. It was quiet. So quiet that it seemed like the world had paused for a moment. I walked into a diner and sat down at a booth in the back, the old wooden table creaking under the weight of my thoughts. The waitress was kind, but her smile didn't mask the curiosity in her eyes. Small towns are like that. Everyone knows everyone else's business. I could already tell I didn't belong here, but for the first time in a long while, it didn't bother me. I ordered coffee, but I didn't drink it. The steam rose, curling into the air, but it didn't bring me comfort. I had left everything behind. My phone buzzed again, and I could feel the weight of Claire's message pressing down on me. But this time, I didn't look at it. I couldn't. Not yet. I was trying to run away from everything, and I was failing miserably. I could still hear her voice in my head, the way she spoke to David at the party, the way her eyes never left him. And when she looked at me, it wasn't with love or care. It was with something cold, something distant, like I was a stranger in my own life. The moment she chose him, everything I had worked for, everything I thought we had, crumbled. And now I was stuck, lost in the mess of it all, trying to figure out where to go next. The coffee sat there untouched as I buried my face in my hands. I had done everything right. So why did it feel like I was the one who had lost? I couldn't get away from the truth. Claire had moved on. The image of her running into David's arms, the way she threw me aside like I was nothing, wouldn't leave my mind. I had spent so many years bending over backward for her, loving her with everything I had. And for what? So she could toss it all away the moment something more exciting came along? I wasn't sure if I was more angry at her for what she had done, or at myself for allowing it to happen. I had to stop blaming myself. The truth was, I wasn't the one who had destroyed this. She had. She had made a choice. And I needed to face that. I needed to accept it, no matter how much it hurt. I could feel my anger turning into something darker, something colder. But that wasn't me. That wasn't who I was supposed to be. I had spent so long being the nice guy, the guy who always played by the rules, who always let the others take the lead. Maybe now it was time for me to take control. I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I knew I couldn't keep running from the truth. I had to face her. I had to confront her. No more avoiding, no more pretending that everything was fine. I had to make her see the reality of what she had done. It was strange, but for the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of resolve. There was no going back. Claire had broken the trust, and now it was my turn to decide what came next. I couldn't keep playing the victim. I couldn't keep waiting for her to fix things. I had to fix them for myself. The town seemed to quiet even further as I stood up to leave the diner. I paid the waitress, leaving a tip that was too large, but I didn't care. I had bigger things on my mind. I walked out into the night, the crisp air biting at my face. I knew what I had to do. I couldn't let her keep controlling the narrative. I had to take my life back. I pulled out my phone and looked at her message once again. This time, I didn't hesitate. I wasn't going to play nice anymore. I wasn't going to beg for her attention. Instead, I typed the only thing I could think of in that moment. I know. I saw you with him. Don't contact me again. I hit send. I didn't feel relieved. I didn't feel any sense of closure. But I felt something. A sense of power that had been missing for far too long. I had made a decision. For the first time in months, I wasn't going to wait for someone else to fix my life. I was going to fix it myself. I couldn't remember the last time I had felt this kind of clarity. When I pressed send on that message, it was like a weight was lifted, but it wasn't the relief I expected. There was no catharsis, no sudden release of emotion. It was a quiet, unsettling sense of control. I hadn't realized how much I had been letting Claire dictate the terms of my life. But now, things were different. I was no longer waiting for her to come back to me, for her to wake up and realize the mistake she'd made. No more begging, no more hoping for some grand gesture of love that would fix everything. It was over. I stood there for a moment, the night pressing in on me, as if the world had finally exhaled after holding its breath. I looked at my phone again, expecting some kind of response. A part of me thought she might call, beg me to forgive her, but the silence in return was deafening. It didn't matter, though. It couldn't. I drove through the streets, aimless, as the world around me blurred. The streetlights flickered above, but they didn't offer me any answers. They never had. Everything felt hollow. The places I had once considered familiar seemed like they belonged to someone else. I kept trying to shake the image of Claire and David out of my mind, but it lingered like a scar that refused to heal. I ended up in front of a small bar. It wasn't much, an old neon sign flickering above the door, the faint hum of music drifting out from the cracked windows, but something in me urged me to stop. I parked the car and got out. The cold night air wrapped itself around me, and for a second, I felt alive. It was strange, almost like I was reclaiming a part of myself I had forgotten existed. I walked inside, the bell above the door jingling as I entered. The smell of stale beer and old wood hit me immediately, and I scanned the dimly lit room. It was nearly empty, save for a few regulars hunched over their drinks, talking in low voices. I took a seat at the bar and ordered a whiskey. I didn't usually drink alone, but tonight felt different. I needed something to dull the ache in my chest, something to take the edge off. The bartender was a man in his 50s, a bit grizzled, with tired eyes that had seen too much. He slid my drink across the bar with a nod and went back to wiping glasses. I didn't say anything. What was there to say? I just needed a few minutes to think. The glass in front of me trembled slightly as my hand brushed against it. I wasn't sure what I was waiting for, but I had to keep moving forward. I took a long sip. It burned going down, but it wasn't enough to numb the confusion, the bitterness that had settled in my stomach. Claire's betrayal was like a storm that I couldn't outrun, no matter how hard I tried. I knew that if I stayed in this town, I'd never be able to escape her memory. Her ghost would haunt every corner, every quiet street, every single day. I needed a change. I needed to leave. But where could I go? The idea of running felt both ridiculous and liberating. But the truth was, there was nothing for me here anymore. The life I thought I had was gone. Claire had taken it from me, piece by piece, until there was nothing left to hold on to. I sat there for what felt like hours, nursing my drink, watching the clock tick by, until I finally stood up. I paid for the whiskey, gave the bartender a nod, and left. The air outside was even colder than before. It bit at my skin, but I didn't care. I needed to feel something, anything that would keep me grounded. The numbness had to end. I walked to my car, still not sure where I was going. My mind kept drifting back to Claire, but the more I thought about her, the more I realized that I wasn't going to fix this. I had to move on. I had to find a way to rebuild myself, to rediscover who I was without her. The thought of her with David made my blood boil, but there was nothing I could do. She had already made her choice. I drove through the night, my mind a whirlwind of thoughts. I wasn't sure what came next, but for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't care. The road stretched out before me, endless and empty, and I was walking away from everything I thought I knew, towards something unknown, something that could only be mine. I had no destination. I had no plans. All I knew was that I had to keep moving. The road ahead was mine to take, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was running away. I felt like I was finally running towards something better. The road stretched on, an endless ribbon of asphalt beneath the tires, winding through dark, empty stretches of countryside. I didn't have a destination, just a desire to leave everything behind. The world felt heavy, like I was carrying a weight that couldn't be shrugged off. The town, Claire, David, none of it seemed real anymore. It was all a cruel, blurry dream that I could never wake up from. I wasn't sure how much time had passed, but I ended up at a small motel on the outskirts of another town. The neon sign buzzed faintly, casting a sickly glow over the parking lot. I parked the car and sat there for a moment, staring at the sign, as if it might give me some sort of guidance. It didn't. It was just a sign, just another place in the world where people stopped for a night's rest and moved on the next morning. I wasn't sure what I was doing, but I felt compelled to step out of the car. I needed to break the cycle, to stop feeling like I was drowning in my own thoughts. I walked into the lobby, where an older woman behind the counter gave me a quick glance. She didn't say anything at first, just scribbled something down in her book and handed me a key. "Room 6, she said, her voice low, as if she had said it 1,000 times before. I took the key and made my way down the dimly lit hallway. The carpet was worn, the air stale, but it didn't matter. I opened the door to the room, and the faint smell of cleaning supplies greeted me. It wasn't much, but it was enough. I locked the door behind me and sat down on the edge of the bed, letting the exhaustion hit me all at once. For the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel the need to chase after something. No messages, no unanswered calls, no expectations. Just silence. But even in that silence, I couldn't escape the voice in my head. Claire. Her face. Her laughter. The way she had looked at David, like I was nothing more than a shadow in the background of her life. I tried to push it away, but the more I thought about it, the more it became clear she had made her choice. And I had to respect that. I couldn't keep chasing after someone who didn't want me anymore. As much as it hurt, I had to let her go. I took a deep breath and stood up, walking to the small bathroom to splash some water on my face. The cold water shocked me, jolting me awake. The reflection in the mirror was unfamiliar, tired, beaten down, like a man who had been through hell and back. I didn't recognize him, but he was me. I had let myself become a man who was afraid to stand up for what he deserved. I had allowed my life to be dictated by someone else's choices. The idea hit me like a wave. If I was going to survive this, I had to find myself again. I couldn't keep going down this path, letting Claire's absence define me. I needed to reclaim my life, to rediscover who I was without her. I walked back to the bed and grabbed my phone. I didn't care about the messages Claire had sent. I didn't care about the guilt or the shame that weighed me down. I opened the contacts, found my brother's number, and typed a message. I'm leaving. I'm not sure where I'm going, but I can't stay here. I'll explain everything when I can. I hesitated for a moment, then pressed send. The knot in my stomach loosened just a little. For the first time in a long time, I was doing something for myself. I wasn't waiting for Claire to decide what happened next. I wasn't waiting for anyone. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. I didn't know what the future held, but I was ready to face it. I packed my things quickly, leaving the motel room behind. The road was still long, but I was no longer afraid to take it. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't have a plan, but I had hope. And that, for the first time in a long time, felt like enough. I hit the road again, the endless highway stretching out in front of me. I wasn't running from my past anymore. I was running towards something new, something better. Because as much as I had lost, there was still a part of me that was waiting to be found. And no matter what happened, I was determined to find it. The days blurred together as I kept driving, each mile a reminder that I was leaving behind everything I had known. I passed through small towns, random stretches of road that seemed to go on forever, but none of it felt real. It was all just a backdrop to the chaos that had unraveled my life. I wasn't sure where I was headed, but I had no intention of stopping until I figured it out. It wasn't that I was running from Claire, at least not entirely. I was running from the version of myself that I had become. The man who had allowed himself to be second in line, always waiting, always wondering when things would be right. The man who had spent too many years sacrificing, thinking love would somehow fix everything. I had been naive, but I was done being that person. I couldn't live in the shadows of someone else's choices anymore. One evening, as I was passing through a quiet little town, I saw a small bookstore that caught my eye. There was something about it, its old wooden sign swinging gently in the breeze, the faint glow of the warm lights inside. It wasn't much, but something about it felt right. I parked the car and walked in, greeted by the soft scent of old paper and coffee. The place was small but cozy, the kind of place that felt like it had stories hidden in every corner, just waiting to be discovered. I walked past the rows of books, tracing my fingers along their spines, until something caught my attention. A journal. It wasn't a fancy one, just a plain leather-bound book, but there was something about it that made me stop. I picked it up and flipped through the empty pages, the weight of it settling in my hand. It felt like a sign, like it was time for me to start writing my own story. For too long, I had allowed others to dictate the narrative. But now, it was time to take control of my own life. To fill the pages with my thoughts, my emotions, and the journey I was about to undertake. I walked to the counter and bought the journal, along with a cup of coffee from the small cafe attached to the bookstore. It wasn't much, but it felt like a step in the right direction. I sat at one of the small tables by the window and opened the journal, staring at the blank pages. For the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to think. I thought about Claire, about everything we had been through. The good moments, the bad ones, the memories that still lingered in my mind. I thought about the future, what I wanted, what I needed. And slowly, the words started to spill out. Not just about her, but about me. About who I had been, and who I wanted to be. I wasn't sure what came next, but I knew one thing for sure. I was going to be the author of my own story. No more hiding. No more waiting. I stayed in that bookstore for hours, the world outside fading away as I lost myself in the pages of the journal. When I finally looked up, the sun had set, and the bookstore was closing. I closed the journal, feeling a sense of accomplishment, something I hadn't felt in a long time. I walked back to the car, the night air cool against my skin. I felt lighter, not because everything was fixed, but because I had taken the first step toward fixing myself. I wasn't running from my past anymore. I was learning to live with it, to accept it, and to move forward. I knew that I would face more challenges ahead. There would be moments when I wanted to turn back, to call Claire and beg for answers, for closure. But I couldn't. I had made my decision. I had to keep going. The road ahead was mine to travel, and for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to take it. I drove out of the town, the headlights cutting through the darkness, and as I did, I couldn't help but smile. Because, for the first time in months, I felt like I was on the path to something better, something that was mine. And nothing, not Claire, not David, not the past, could take that away from me. As the miles flew by, something in me shifted. The road ahead wasn't just a path to escape, it was a road to rediscovery. It wasn't about leaving Claire behind anymore. It wasn't about what she had done or the hurt she had caused. It was about me. The man I had forgotten, the person I had buried beneath years of sacrifice, compromise, and unspoken pain. It was time for him to come back to life. I found myself heading west, towards the mountains, a place where the air was fresh and the sky seemed endless. The thought of being surrounded by nature, away from the noise of the world, filled me with an odd sense of peace. For the first time in so long, I wasn't running from something. I was running towards something, a new beginning, a chance to reinvent myself, to rewrite my story. I pulled into a small cabin nestled at the edge of a forest, a far cry from the bustling city I had once known. The place felt serene, the kind of quiet that settled deep within your bones. I rented the cabin for a week, giving myself time to think, to breathe, and to finally let go of the weight I had been carrying for so long. Each morning, I woke to the sound of birds singing and the sun breaking through the trees. I would make coffee, sit on the porch, and watch the world slowly wake up around me. It wasn't much, just a cabin in the woods, a cup of coffee, and the freedom to be myself. But it was enough. I felt alive again. I kept writing in my journal, pouring my thoughts onto the pages. It became my therapy, my way of processing everything I had been through. I wasn't just writing about Claire, I was writing about me. I was learning to accept the pain, to embrace the lessons it had taught me, and to finally release it. I realized that in order to move forward, I had to forgive, not her, but myself. The guilt that had weighed on me for so long started to lift. I had allowed myself to be a victim for too long, but now, I was taking control of my own narrative. Every day, I felt a little lighter, a little more in control of my own happiness. It was a slow process, but it was progress. And then, something unexpected happened. A message. Not from Claire. I didn't need to hear from her anymore. But from my brother, the one I had reached out to weeks ago. I've been thinking about you. When you're ready, let's talk. I'm here, no matter what. It was exactly what I needed to hear. No judgments, no expectations, just the simple reminder that I wasn't alone. That there were people who cared, who wanted me to be okay. I picked up the phone and dialed his number, hearing his voice on the other end for the first time in months. And it was the most comforting sound in the world. We talked for hours, catching up on everything and nothing at all. It was like a weight had been lifted just by hearing his voice. I knew then that I had family, I had friends, and most importantly, I had myself. I wasn't lost anymore. I wasn't broken. I was healing, piece by piece. As the days went on, I started to build a new routine. I hiked through the woods, swam in the nearby lake, and spent time simply being with myself. There was no rush, no pressure, just me and the world around me, reminding me that life still had so much to offer. And then one evening, as the sun began to set, casting a warm orange glow over the mountains, I realized that the ache in my heart had faded. It wasn't gone completely, but it no longer defined me. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. I was finally at peace with everything that had happened. Claire was part of my past, but she no longer held the key to my future. I smiled to myself, feeling the weight of it all fall away. For the first time in a long time, I felt whole again. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, I knew that this was just the beginning. The beginning of a life I would live on my own terms, free from the shadows of my past. I wasn't running from my life anymore. I was embracing it. And it felt like freedom.